Hello and welcome to Sacred Psychology, the podcast for misfits and mystics. Here, neuroscience and spirituality go hand in hand. Join me, Tamara Powell, on a no-holds-barred adventure outside the box, because that's where all the truly great shit happens anyway. Welcome back to Sacred Psychology. I'm your host, Tamara Powell. Now, before we move into today's conversation, I want to let you in on an incredible offer I've got going on. My ever-popular Iconic Integration self-study course is getting a major facelift. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool to pass on some ridiculous savings before I relaunch it? Normally, this course sells for $144, but right now, I'm offering it at just $44. Based on IFS, or Internal Family Systems Therapy, this course packs all the punch of modern neuroscience and neuroemotional release in an easy-to-use self-study format that will give you radical results fast. You can learn how to channel the parts of you that are needed for every situation in life, love, or business. You'll also identify the parts of you that need healing and learn to offer yourself the necessary gifts for growth. And my hope is that you will, by the time we're done with this 28-day journey, feel amazing in your own skin and radiate the love, compassion, fierceness, and sex appeal you know you have. Guys, my clients have raved about this method for years. Heather said it was the best money she has spent on herself in years. Charlotte wrote that this is one of my favorite things Tamara has ever offered, besides our one-on-one sessions. I grew so much and have revisited it several times since. April writes, Tamara's Iconic Integration course is amazing. Let me tell you what, this course has me identifying all sorts of people in my life who, quote, run the show, so to speak, in my head. Every day, it seems like a new person pops up during the exercises. It is truly helping me dissect who shapes my inner thoughts throughout the day and how they influence my decisions. Thank you, Tams. And Rachel wrote, so worth the investment. I haven't even finished. I've been taking it a bit at a time, and I know I can pace myself, but I'm about 3/4 through, and it has been life-changing. Hashtag no regrets whatsoever. Hashtag best investment of 2017. Hashtag no joke. Hashtag Tamara and IFS for the win. Guys, here's how it works. For those opting in, I will email you a daily audio training and written journal prompts discussing overall themes and stories from my own life and clients that I have used this incredibly transformative method with. Each week, we will explore a different category of parts, personas, or sides of our personality, if you will. There's nothing like it on the market right now, and you'll have unlimited evergreen access to it forever. So if you're interested, head on over to ariatherapy.com, that's ARYA therapy.com, and hit the Iconic Integration tab on the drop-down menu, or just click the link in the show notes. Whew, thanks for hanging in there with me. And now, on with today's show. Welcome back to Sacred Psychology. I'm your host, Tamara Powell. Today, I'm diving into a bit of a delicate subject, and that is sexual trauma. My guest, Brittany Whitehawk, is a mentor and guide for survivors of sex-related trauma. She empowers, strips fears, and builds confidence unlike any shadow work healer you've ever heard of. By integrating her knowledge of criminal justice and her own healing from sex-related trauma, she's designed methods to get fast and lasting change for the livers, as she calls them, that she works with. And so in tonight's conversation, we dive into the philosophy that she has that there are 3 pillars to sexual trauma: victim, survivor, and liver. And then we move into a bit of an untangling and exploring just what is shadow work and how she uses it with all of her clients to really give them the integration and put them back into the driver's seat of the life that they've always wanted. So without further ado, I give you the incomparable Brittany Whitehawk. Hey, Brittany.
Hey, Tams. How are you?
I'm good. Welcome to the show, hon.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I am so honored and stoked about this.
Thank you for being willing to really bring a tough subject to light and give us some of your time and experience with it. I really appreciate it.
Oh man, absolutely. This is what I live for. It's such a deep message to me and for me. And I mean, I got the voice and I have the lady balls, if you will, to talk about it. So
hell yes. Thank you. Because it really does take a woman with lady balls of steel and grace to hit this topic of sex related trauma and to make it accessible and to normalize it.
Absolutely. It's not talked about enough. And I'm changing that. So
amen. And I am on board for that. I can't wait to get this out to listeners. So talk to me a little bit about your own personal experiences, hard and, that as that can be.
Yeah. So first of all, I don't have any fancy degrees or anything like that for trauma speaking, if you will, but I've lived through it. So that is degree enough as far as I'm concerned. Right?
Absolutely.
I actually have several experiences with sex-related traumas. The first time I was 3 and I was molested by my female babysitter. The second time it was another female babysitter. I was about 5 to 7 and her husband participated in that. And the final time, or times, however you want to look at it, I was 12 to 15 and that was at the hands of my biological father.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah. So literally my entire developmental stage riddled basically with sex trauma. And
you were being used the whole time.
Yeah.
Your self-worth was wrapped up in, what you were providing for other people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's taken me a really long time. Now I see this like, I'm way older than I am. I'm only 30, but
still a long time from 12.
Yeah. Absolutely. And from 3 and 5 and all that. But it took me a long time to get through that on my own. I didn't have the accessibility to, traditional therapies and all of that. My mom refused to take me, mainly because, she knew what was going on and kind of aided in that crap, if you will, when I was a teenager. So that would have been, her admitting that she knew what was going on. And I think it's so important that people understand, first and foremost, that those who are the perpetrators in these situations are not always people that just snatch you up off the street.
Right.
We grow up with this idea of stranger danger, and we don't even entertain the idea that it's not always stranger danger. Sometimes it's family danger. Sometimes it's the person I trust the most danger.
Yeah, more common than not, actually.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It is more statistical that, a molester, a child molester is going to be someone in that kid's family, or immediate friends of family and whatnot. So, that was one thing that I had to really come to terms with, was that, I fell right into those statistics, if you will.
Right. You were groomed for it, the accessibility, the opportunity, and yeah. Wow.
Yeah, all of that. And the other thing I really want to point out for your listeners, Tams, is that, we are so conditioned as a society, as a global society, to believe that it's men who are perpetrating these crimes all the time. And that's just not fucking true.
Yes. Thank you so much for saying so. Yes.
Yes, it does happen more so often with men. However, men are also being perpetrated against by women as well, which is like a whole other branch to this subject,
Definitely. And so much stigma. And it's just not often talked about when it's a female caregiver in any capacity. There's still just so much disbelief, which comes from a lot of ignorance. I'm so glad you and I are talking about that today, that there are still quite a few, broken women out there who are also abusing children.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and, I went to school for criminal justice, and I have that at least to, back up my, my statistical squawking, if you will. But, it's the one thing that kind of amazed me was that there's literally no resources, especially for men who have been through this, and I work with men and women. I mentor both. But But I also, when mentoring men, it comes to, really breaking down that bravado and that idea that they grew up with, that there's no possible way that they could have ever been raped or molested.
Sure.
Because they're a guy, and then you have everything else that goes into it as well. The body's natural responses.
Yes.
That happen.
Thank you. Yes.
And there's many, many men out there that don't think it was rape just because,
the penis
their body
responded. Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's really hard. And even for women who have been raped and, her vagina responded to that. It's hard for people to come to terms with the fact that, like, in those situations, we have no control over our body.
Right. Whether
inside of us or outside of us. And that stripping of autonomy is what can really kind of, for lack of a better term, fuck somebody up. And
it does. Yes, it's secondary trauma all over again.
Absolutely.
It's really confusing. And I'm so glad that you point that out because, there have been, well-known speakers like Oprah and, Maya Angelou, who's talked about other women that she's worked with. And it's just really important about how confusing it was to dissect, first of all, what was happening to them. And then secondly, the fact that not everyone's experience is the traumatic rape, especially when they've been groomed from a very young age. And what do we do with that when it's not always, a ripping and tearing, and that there's a body's natural response system? So thank you so much for shedding light on that as well and really normalizing it for the many victims, right? 1 and potentially 2.5 or 3 out there, depending upon what stats we're looking at.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
A lot of people. It's essentially everybody if it's not yourself, and that's what I think too is so staggering to me is that we still have this whole, rape culture. Which is a whole other topic. Don't get me started because I will shoot off at the mouth.
I bet.
I will shoot off at the mouth at that. But, when you really think about it, literally everybody has been affected by this in some way, shape, or form, whether they were the victim in the situation, whether they were, the perpetrator in the situation, because perpetrators are still affected by this as well.
Yes.
Granted, it's different. There's levels and whatnot, but I think we forget that, even the monstrous acts are not performed by monsters. They're performed by people as well.
Yes, people who have likely survived trauma themselves.
Exactly.
And we're going to talk more about the shadow and the very, intense complexities of a human being.
Oh, yeah.
But before that, I love that you have this philosophy that I could not agree with more, that there's really 3 pillars or stages to sexual trauma. And that is, the victim, then the survivor, and then the liver. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Oh, man, absolutely. So, victim stage is the, woe is me. Why did this happen to me? Still very much living in that space of, recurring thought and manic thoughts and, the flashbacks and the flinching and all of that kind of stuff. Anything that takes you back into that moment and elicits like a huge response out of you is what I consider to be the victim stage.
Right. Very natural, very understandable. And what I love about your stages theory here is that it once again, normalizes and gives people an opportunity to see the way out and the scaffolding so that they can rate, where am I at with this? And what do I get to look forward to?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things, when I finally was able to get into therapy, unfortunately, the therapy that I experienced was very, victim blaming. It was very, let's hash this out. Let's revisit everything. And that's the last fucking thing a rape victim wants to do is go back to that time. Like, they're already lived there. They're already tormented in that space. I don't like doing that. I want, the people that work with me or the people that are listening even just to understand, like, you don't have to go back and sit in that space in order to get out of it. Just recognize that you were there.
I love that. That's a tweetable moment number one. You don't have to go back to that space to get out of it. That's really big for, a large chunk of the non-traditional therapists and coaches listening to this as well. I couldn't agree with you more that we do not have to re-traumatize a person. The old model of desensitization is not a one-size-fits-all. In fact, in my experience, it really echoes what you're saying, that we can move from here forward.
Yep. That's exactly what I do. I don't want someone who is listening to me and understanding and like really feeling into the depths of their soul what I'm saying to them, to then hear me say, but you need to talk about exactly every situation you've been in. You sure as shit do not. Mm-hmm. Just recognize that you were there, understand that it happened, and that there's nothing you can do, unfortunately, to change it.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that you have to then live in this victim space. It doesn't mean you have to, set up camp because somebody says, oh, you're a victim. No.
Yes.
You always get to decide, and it is always a decision. If, this is not, I don't mean this for people who are like freshly victimized, okay?
Right. This is the normalized stage of it. You're right afterwards from, the day of your molestation or assault until the point where you are ready to recapitulate this and start, changing the narrative. That's a good space to be in. And there's no one size fits all. I love that you're giving people permission to, I think for me, the victim stage is about a stage of acknowledgement and empowerment of, first of all, speaking up. This happened to me. It was not my fault. That's what I hear.
Yes.
And I think that's very necessary for the victims to be able to say, excuse me, I was violated. This was not my fault.
Yes.
And, crying through it, healing through it, screaming through it, whatever they have to do.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm going to go further even to say that it's not, necessary. Like, I encourage it. Please. This is always going to be about your growth and your future and how you want your life to be. Just because you've been through this, experience does not mean that experience gets to define who the fuck you are. You always get to define who you are.
Yes.
So, when we define ourselves as victims, when we define ourselves as, oh, the girl who was raped, we kind of put a ceiling on ourselves, and that also gives permission to everybody else to put a ceiling on us. But if you just, and I know it sounds like kind of preachy, but like if you just sit back for a minute and go, you know what, this happened. I didn't ask for this shit. I didn't want this. It happened. There's nothing I can do to change the fact that it happened. But there is everything that I can do to change what happens from this point on. And that's how you get into the survivor mode of things, right? So, going back to my philosophy with that, in the survival mode, the survivor is someone who, understands this, kind of resigns to the fact that there's nothing that can be changed as far as the past, the situation. And they go about living their lives in the daily. I don't want to say not striving for much, but there are definitely levels to being a survivor. Everything's a process, right?
Sure.
So, the survivor, once you get into that space, I like to think of this as, the three pillars, but there's like a rope bridge in between all three. And that survivor keeps that bridge open to victimhood for when it's needed. For when those flashbacks that come up and bite you in the ass out of nowhere, or especially if it is a traumatic experience, like a physically traumatic experience, as far as, a very violent situation, the PTSD and all that can come with that, there's going to be flashbacks with it. So I always say to my survivors, keep that rope connected for as long as you need to. Eventually you're going to see that you don't need it anymore. It's almost like just that safety net. You know what I mean? Like just knowing that you have it there, but you don't need it unless you like really want to use it.
Right.
But typically at that point, like you understand and you feel the difference between victimhood and surviving. And surviving just feels better because it's starting to feel more and more authentic to who you really are,
Absolutely. Because to me, as I'm feeling into the energy of, the words that you're using and in these stages, the victim stage really feels like crisis management when we need to be treated with kid gloves because we're raw and it hurts and we might have, open wounds. And so the victim stage is about nursing the very open trauma at that point. And then the survivor stage is more about like, we've crawled through the victim and now we're beginning to walk again.
Yep.
And then as I see you moving to liver, that's where we get to run and thrive.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The liver stage. Oh, I love it. That's my favorite stage. I love getting people from the survivor stage to the liver stage because
and not everyone talks about there being a third stage. So again, this is why I love your model is because most people are like, I've gone from victim to now I'm a survivor and they think the work is done. And I love that you're like, oh no, baby girl, we can make it even better. Watch this.
Yeah, there's more shit to do. Like, and there's nothing wrong. Like, let me just make sure that this is clear. There's nothing wrong if you want to stay at survival, right? Because getting to survival unto itself, fucking kudos.
Huge.
Absolutely. Absolutely kudos. But if you're sitting there and you're like, you know what, I need something more. Like, I'm not feeling like me, like who I really am. And you're seeing that, part of why you feel like that is because of, the shit you've experienced and what you've gone through and how those things have shaped you into a survivor, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Hopefully it does.
Yes, it does.
Sometimes when I get on a roll, like some things just don't make sense. They make
Keep
sense
preaching.
in my head, but
keep preaching. You got it.
But and then like when you get to that survival stage and you're there for a bit, you pick yourself up and you are going through your life, but there's something missing. There's something not quite totally feeling right to you about you. That's when the good shit happens. That's when the good work happens, right? So that's what takes us into being a liver. And the first time I kind of used this analogy, even I was like, this sounds really janky. Like, this is not, this sounds ridiculous. But
I like it.
The more I've used it, the more it just absolutely fits and the more it makes sense. So a liver, if you think of the organ itself, right, in our bodies, in any body, the liver filters out the toxins from the bloodstream. So it literally filters out the toxic trauma to the life force, right? Because toxins are a type of trauma.
I see where you're going, boo.
Exactly, right? So livers have learned how to do that. And liver is not just that meaning. It also means someone who is living. They are an active liver.
No longer just surviving. Now we are living again and thriving.
Exactly. Absolutely. And to me, there is nothing more beautiful than a man or a woman who has gotten to that place and who, like you said, just runs. I like to say that when you get to the liver stage, you're pretty much ready just to cut the rope over to survivorhood. Like, fuck that. You don't need that anymore. You're done with it, right?
Right.
And then when you get onto that pillar of being a liver, you are in the whitest of rooms and you have every color imaginable to paint your life with.
So lovely.
Have fun, right?
Yes.
It is totally possible. And I think we get so caught up in this idea that when we've been victimized, that's it. Nothing else. Can't go forward. And it's total bullshit. I mean, I do it every single day. Every single day of my life, I look at the things that I've been through and I remind myself that, you know what, I've lived through all of this shit.
Right.
And now I get to change other people's lives. I get to, raise two incredible, gentle men and, help change the world, even just one person a day.
Right.
Right. And that's my purpose. That's what I'm here to do. So yeah, absolutely. Being a liver, more than possible.
It really is taking your life back and almost hitting the reset button on you get to choose now. Once again. taking that autonomy back. So, which leads me into, I know that with trauma of any kind, whether it's big T trauma or little T trauma, like we say in my field, because, life itself can be pretty traumatic at times, just going through the daily experiences, that all sorts of shit tends to rise to the surface. And here's where your love of shadow work comes into play.
Oh, yeah.
Because you really help these, livers or, a person at any stage in the game really be able to wade through and start to make sense of stuff and recapitulate it. So talk to me how you fell in love with shadow work and what role it plays for you in the work you do with clients.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I didn't even know that's what I was doing. Let me just make that clear. Sure. At first, I had no idea that's what it was. But I had to get myself to this point by myself. Like I said, I didn't have the therapies that actually helped me to get better, if you will. Not that, I don't know if that's the right word, but I didn't have that support. I didn't have that support from my mom. I didn't have that support from obviously my dad because he was the one perpetrating. But, I had to do it myself. And how I did that was a lot of deep introspection, looking at the parts of me that, I didn't necessarily want to look at, very uncomfortable looking at these things.
Always.
But I had to, and I knew that I had to. And more importantly, looking at them and just saying, you know what, I see you. I see you, smart mouth. I see you, sharp tongue. And being like, and I love that you're there because you've helped me in certain times, but really with how I handle shadow work. And I think more importantly, how I define shadow work is really just shadows to me are anything that we've denied, right? We've pushed down or we've had other people push down into us, the really negative shit, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, all that kind of shit. But then also, the stuff that is residual from the traumas that we experience.
Right.
But more than that, and I think people don't understand this enough, and it kind of frustrates the shit out of me, is that our shadows are not always this dark, bad stuff. Sometimes our greatest things about us are in the shadows.
Yes, Dr. Lourdes Viado calls shadow work, sometimes an invitation to your untapped potential.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, I've never heard of her, but that's awesome.
Yeah. She's a depth psychologist. So being, Jungian trained, Carl Jung, who coined the term shadow work. Yes. I mean, you just can't get away from it, but I love her analogy of that, of course, it's the stuff that we've cut off, but in there, exactly what you were saying, spot on. That's also where our untapped potential lies. Because if we don't integrate, like I know you love doing both the light and the dark, then we're cut off from part of who we are and so much of what perhaps we came here to do.
Exactly. And I mean, you can look up whatever theory you want to as far as the yin yang model. And I've talked about this as well. You cannot have one without the other.
Right.
You cannot, you can't have your cake but have no pieces to it, if you will.
Sure.
We absolutely, as much as we love the things about us that we love about us, our generosity, our kindness, our compassion, all of these things, absolutely are light things. But if we're sitting there also going, but I hate this about me, I hate that I anger quickly, I hate that I do this, I don't want to look at this part of me, then to me, all we're doing is we're negating all of that good shit we just listed off, right? Because it's a dishonoring of our true selves. Our true selves is going to be, in this definition, a black and white, right? There's gray areas, but there's going to be a black and white to things. And if you're so dead set on just seeing one side and you're not looking at the other side, you're really, really not doing yourself any favors with healing.
I love that because I am myself really passionate about talking about how there's no negative emotions. There's only potentially negative behaviors. And so a lot of, especially trauma victims, want to cut off certain parts of them and leave them in their shadow for like anger.
Yeah.
But anger is so necessary. It's a motivating emotion. It tells you to get yourself up off your ass and do something.
Exactly.
So I love that you are giving these, men and women access to all of themselves again.
Yeah. And I think it's so important, especially when you consider like, statistically, I think it's probably incomparable and like not even anywhere near quantifiable.
Right.
But, the levels of disassociation that happen with sex trauma survivors specifically. Now, this can happen with any kind of trauma, of course, but
especially sexual trauma. Yes,
exactly. Especially with that, because there is a disassociation that happens during the event. Anytime the trauma is brought up after that, anytime a rape joke is made, there's a level of disassociation.
Wow,
and
good point.
People don't understand that, which is why I get so pissed off about rape culture. But I digress.
Next masterclass.
Right. And those levels of disassociation are not connecting yourself. We're there for moments of preservation, right? Self-preservation.
Absolutely.
And that stuff that is, like quote unquote forgotten, self-trust, confidence, your boundaries, your empowerment, even your relationship with sex, which is another thing that I don't feel anybody really talks about when it comes to this stuff. That shit doesn't just go away.
Of course not.
It doesn't just like poof evaporate up into the air. Like it has to go somewhere, and it goes into your shadows and it stays there until, you're ready to look at them again. Or if you don't, it just stays there and you miss out on potentially a really fucking amazing person that is you.
Yes, I know way too many victims that have cut off access to their own orgasm because it just felt so wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Oh my God, of course. Like I said, it's not spoken about enough. I actually have kind of like a little workshop that I do that is centered completely around sex. And it's all about empowering yourself and, exploring what your sexuality and sensuality means.
Right.
After the fact, because that is still a part of your healing, and it's so important. And with that disassociation, especially when it comes to sex and, especially societal views on how women should behave around sex and how men should behave with sex and all of that shit. Again, another topic for another day, but,
but I love your point. Yes, it is so important because, the brain is the biggest sex organ that we have. So if a traumatized brain is constantly disassociating, then we do cut off access to our pleasure. It's almost like train tracks, that get rerouted from normal development to all of a sudden they're way off heading to Nowheresville, just this dead end. And so the work that you are doing is wonderful because it's rerouting those train tracks back to where they were supposed to go and putting people in the driver's seat and saying, hey, what did you want your sex life to be like?
Exactly.
Before, someone stole that from you.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, and that's pretty much like how I handle anything when it comes to, working with my clients, is that it's always your choice, man. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you how your healing should go. It is your healing. My job is to just help you, especially in those shadows, especially when we're bringing shit up about, you didn't say anything because you were so afraid. There's so much guilt and shame that goes along with somebody not speaking up. And my job is to remind you, you did that for a reason.
Yes.
You did that to protect yourself. You did that, at the time to protect somebody else even.
Yeah, I'm really getting this image of you and your sole purpose as being one of the angels or the spirit guides in all of the world's wisdom traditions that would come down and stir the waters. And then whoever was broken would be lifted into the waters at that time to be healed. And so to me, and it's so beautiful with your clearing the rain.
Yes.
It just washed over me right now that, more water terminology. You stir the waters and sure, shit rises to the surface when we do that. And you allow people the opportunity to skim it off the surface.
Yes.
We're done with this.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no sense in hanging on to that stuff, especially longer than you need to.
Right.
Because it's going to sound really fucked up, but when you do that, when you're hanging on to shit you don't need to hang on to, you're no longer the victim. You're the perpetrator in that sense.
Yeah, a self-perpetrator.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. You're victimizing yourself at that point then, and I don't want anybody to do that. I don't want anybody to think that doing that is okay, because I see tremendous amounts of love in people.
Mm-hmm.
I just need them to see it in themselves as well,
That's very powerful, Brittany. Yeah, it's like someone else stabbed you in the back and you're here twisting the knife for them over and over.
Yeah. And, there's a lot of epiphanies. I like to call them epiphanies and shit, because sometimes there's extras that go with it.
It's a good word.
Right? The epiphanies that happen when, somebody sits down and they're like, oh my God, I really have been sabotaging literally every relationship in my life because I've been so afraid that this trust is going to be broken again because, my perpetrator when I was 9 did this. And it's the same situation, this stuff. That's the other thing about shadow work that I think, unless you're doing it or unless you're aware of it, this shit ain't going nowhere. Mm-hmm. It's always going to be there. Mm-hmm. Are you going to just sit back and let it, force itself into your face? Or are you going to take the proactive stance and be like, okay, bitch, let's go.
Yes.
Look at this shit.
Absolutely, because the psyche is brilliant with its defense mechanisms. And so it won't let go of these things until you literally tell it to.
Yep.
And I love that you're willing to hold people's hands, because it can feel scary when you're not quite sure what's lurking in the shadows.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I find that that's probably the biggest reason why people tend to be kind of skittish or shy about starting this journey or starting any journey with their healing, is because what the fuck am I going to find?
Yep.
And I always ask them, what if you found everything?
Exactly. It's never been nearly as scary as our minds make it out to be. Not once, not a single case have I ever had. Usually it's more like we shine a light on and they're like, oh, that's what it is? Yeah. Oh, like a toy soldier being held up to a projector.
Yeah.
I imagine this big, scary thing and, oh, that's what it is? Okay. Well, I can deal with that.
Exactly. It's just really taking that opportunity when those moments arise to commit yourself to yourself. Mm-hmm. And I find that and I have like this my 4-step, I don't know if you've heard it yet, Sam, but decide, commit, plan, and execute.
It's good.
That is all you need for shadow work. Mm-hmm. That's all you need. You decide that you're going to do it. All right. You commit to the fact that you're doing this, no matter how hard or no matter how sticky the situations get. Fuck it, we're doing it. You plan. Okay, so I'm going to look at this today. And then you execute. You actually do. And just that little simple formula has seriously changed a ton of people's lives. It's changed my life even still. I mean, shadow work isn't something that's just once done, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. It is ongoing for the rest of your life, because there's going to be situations that are happening now that you don't even think about, that 10 years from now, you're going to be like, oh, shit. Oh, there's that shadow. But what's really cool, and I've found, is that when you do the shadow work to kind of help clear up the past, if you will, it makes it so much easier when you're actually going through the shit in present day, because you can be like, okay, I can see where this is going. I see you, shadow. We're not playing this game. I'm not going down this rabbit hole again. And it gives you the chance to really empower yourself and really take that like solid grip them up by the shirt collar stance on your own life. And that's what I want for people. That's where I want them to get to. So, I mean, I say all the time, my ultimate goal is to put myself out of business.
Well, I love that because you're giving people permission to bring their present, nurturing adult parts of their psyche to the table to handle this trauma work, rather than what a lot of the other modalities do, accidentally trigger the exiled, traumatized child to try and deal with the shadow. And that's just not ever going to work very well.
Yeah, I mean, and I equate that to, I have 2 boys. My oldest is 6, my youngest is 3. I equate that to telling my 6-year-old, okay, honey, now it's time to look at this really adult situation and try to make sense of it.
Exactly.
The 6-year-old's not going to know what the fuck I'm talking about, you know, and yeah, exactly like you said, it's the chance for an adult look at adult shit, like adult business, you know,
right.
It's not always the easiest thing to shadow work, and it's not always the scariest thing to shadow work either. To me, I mean, just for me personally, it is far scarier staying in that space of, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want. I don't know who I want to be. I don't know where I'm going. You know, all of that uncertainty scares the shit out of me.
Right.
And, you know, shadow work and light work and any kind of healing that you can do for your heart and soul it's really just tools, you know, for you to build that life that not only you deserve, and I don't give a shit how cliche it sounds, but you really do deserve that, you know?
Absolutely.
But a life that you fucking want. There's nothing wrong with wanting a beautiful and an incredible life. So fucking build it. Nobody else is going to do it for you.
Amen, girl. So how can people come hang out with you and learn more about your awesome services?
Oh my God. So I'm all over the place, but my favorite hangout is in my group under the umbrella. You can find us on Facebook. If you just go into facebook.com/groups under umbrella, both the U's are capitalized, or you can find it by going to bit.ly/shelter the storm. Both of the S's are capitalized. I have my Facebook biz page, so that's Clearing the Rain on Facebook, and I have my website, which is www.clearingtherain.com. But yeah, I mean, I try to be everywhere because this isn't a situation that affects just a small group of people. This affects everybody. And you know, yeah.
Thank you so much for stepping up and being an advocate and just being you, girl. You just make it feel good. And I will have links to all of that in the show notes. So people, you don't have to pull over and try and write that down right now. Just swipe right and click on the link. It'll be on there. And thank you so much, Brittany.
Thank you, Sam. Seriously, like I said, I'm so honored that I got to do this. And just lastly, for anybody who's listening, you are not alone in any of this. And if for any reason you think that you are, you forgot how connected you are to everybody else. So, you know, your pain isn't just your pain. Your pain is the collective's. And I'm here for you, man.
Perfect. Thanks for listening to the Sacred Psychology Podcast. I pray you found some inspiration and empowerment to go out and make this life the most fulfilling possible. You can follow Sacred Psychology on Facebook and YouTube. If you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Tag us on social media and let us know what you think as well. Please note that the information provided is not meant to convey professional, psychological, or medical advice. If you could use such services, I highly recommend seeking them out from someone you trust. To get in touch with me personally or to see how we might work together, please check out ariatherapy.com or talesfromatrapezoid.com. Until next time, everyone.